Hi, people. We'll try not to make this one too long. The subject matter is just about as depressing as is possible to be, but I've always made a point of not shying away from taboo subjects that I think need to be covered. And of course, domestically, one of the things I feel strongest about, possibly the single issue I feel strongest about in terms of domestic affairs, is crime. Um, I think the country's been sickened by the death, the murder of this little girl in Liverpool, Olivia Pratt Corbell, 9 years old, killed in a gangland crossfire. Um, and it's just horrendous. But anyway, yesterday's had a headline that caught my attention, so I thought that would be the basis of this video. A grass is worse than a murderer. Liverpool gang's wall of silence. A grass is worse than a murderer. Just read out the first few paragraphs. This report's by Joe Duggan. Liverpool gang members refuse to inform on fellow criminals because they feel being a grass is worse than being a murderer. That's feel, not fear. According to an ex-Merseyside police investigator who was part of the Reece Jones murder probe. Reece Jones, of course, was the little boy murdered it was 10 years ago. Police in the city have faced a wall of silence which has caused major delays in murder or robbery investigations, a former communications and data specialist told I. The police investigator, who I is not naming, was involved in tracing suspects on their phones and analysing call records in cases involving serious and organised crime groups for more than 10 years. Um, I won't read out the whole report, but I'm just going to quote this. Source told I, the whole grass thing is really strong in Liverpool. The mentality is that to be a grass is worse than being a murderer. That is really deep rooted, especially in Liverpool. Nobody will talk. They won't even talk in the murder of a young child. They're not bothered because to them being a grass has worse connotations than going to prison for killing a child, for killing a kid. The only time that you'll get people that will do what they call grass is if it's a paedophile. That's the only time they will talk in Liverpool. So the murder of a child isn't enough for these people to talk. An innocent little girl. That sickens me to the core. But I think that it reiterates the need to empower the police, um, to disregard those enablers who believe in soft justice, and to absolutely show mercy, no mercy to these filth. Just show no mercy to them. Um, I think that big part of this is tackling gang culture. Now, I know uh, that's not going to happen overnight. I'm not suggesting for a second this is simple, but I think we need to look across the board, and I think there's still a reluctance to do that. For example, young men who think that there's gang life is glamorous, and yeah, I do think it's glamorized by the likes of drill music. I don't know how strong that is in Liverpool. Certainly in London and Birmingham, that's a big thing. Um, this needs to start from, I would say, potentially primary school level. I mean, Liverpool's a city that clearly has a serious problem with this. Think of the pain that that little girl's family are going through right now. All they want is justice for their little girl. Now, arrests have been made, but prosecuting those who I understand a man's been arrested, well, are they going to face stumbling blocks because he's going to keep his mouth shut? Um, the thing is about the police, I think there's a lot of officers who work very hard and their heart's in the right place. They want to catch criminals, but I also think that more often than not, the police don't entirely do themselves favors. The same force not long ago had a ridiculous billboard saying something along the lines of "It's illegal to be offensive." Now, I don't want to disparage the work of investigators and police who are in a very dangerous profession and they're dealing with some sick. Well, no, not sick. That kind of mitigates it as if it's some sort of mental illness. Some bad people. Um, but if you're in Liverpool and you've got some sort of connection to gangs, and you're not going to inform on someone because you want to protect your own hide, knowing that that person is responsible for this little girl's death, I think you're a complete card. But I think it goes beyond this. I mean, people. I'm not talking about gang members necessarily, but ordinary people who witness a crime like this and they're frightened of going to the police because of threats. I think threatening a witness, there needs to be far more severe penalties for threatening a witness because it gets into this business of, well, you're grassing. I hate that word grassing, I always have. Why? Because it gets into this toxic criminal culture that doing the right thing, that actually informing on bad people, people who hurt innocent people, is somehow dishonorable. And it's a sickness. Um, so I think gang culture should be smashed, absolutely mercilessly smashed. I think police chiefs, instead of focusing on Twitter feuds, they need to go to war with these bastards. They need to put the fear of God into them. They need to absolutely do everything short of depriving their basic human rights. Basic. Because otherwise the police will just end up like criminals themselves. Stop short of that, but I think I'd love to see a lot more dawn raids. I'd love to see these scum dragged from their beds. Um, and it's evil that there's people in Liverpool tonight who know who pulled that trigger, but they won't go to the police because oh well, it'd be a grass. Meanwhile, this little girl's family, are they going to get justice? I mean, that's this thing about honor among thieves. Oh well, unless it's a paedophile. Well, yeah, paedophile's wicked. Surely the murder of a child is just as wicked. I mean, murder of anyone's evil, but the murder of a child? Seriously, you're not going to go to the police to give that family justice? Um, it just sickens me to the core. I really think that we need to be severe, absolutely ruthless with criminals like this. I mean, you cannot, these idiot people who want to just take softly approach. Um, I think the further someone gets into that sort of gang culture, the more severe the consequences should be. I don't care if they're 16 or 36. I'm far too soft on young offenders because the thing is, they graduate. They start off, assaulting strangers, and then they get into higher level stuff, probably low level drug dealing, and they just graduate level to level. And the thing is, when the young offenders, they know that their age protects them, so that has to change. Um, I think that one of the biggest problems here is criminals don't fear the police. They don't fear the police and they don't fear prison. So we need to empower the police to be a lot more ruthless. I am not talking about rogue officers doing what they want. They absolutely have to abide by strict procedure, but maybe that procedure needs to be escalated. Um, in recent years, there's been a lot of backlash against the police because of incidents of brutality, but my concern is that will distract people from the need to tackle criminals. I think it's already happening. Um, and people might say, well, she wasn't the target; she was killed in crossfire. But this notion that an innocent child can be collateral damage from the warfare between gangs. Oh well, that's unfortunate, but we're still not going to go to police. I think that any senior criminals withholding evidence should be prosecuted if that's revealed, if that's proven. If it means jailing all the bastards, then so be it. Personally, I think that Merseyside police should be conducting extensive dawn raids. I think every one of these vermin should be dragged from their beds. I mean, if people think my language is strong, it's coming from a point of empathy for the family of this little girl because I can't comprehend the mental anguish, the pain, the loneliness they must be feeling right now, the hopelessness. And although the whole nation sympathizes with them, are they going to get justice? I don't just think that the person who pulled the trigger should be behind bars. I think those who are protecting him should be behind bars. I think that known gang members, I mean, especially leaders, should be arrested simply for that fact alone. I don't think they need to. I I think we have to have a situation where they know that the police mean business. And my biggest concern is they're not frightened of the police, and they should be. They're not frightened of jail, and they should be. Maybe they're not frightened of jail because they find it manageable. Well, prison shouldn't be manageable. It should be terrifying, short of, you know, barbarism. Give them the basic human rights, give them exercise, food, and not much more. I just think that we're going down a bad path in this country. I mean, we've always had crime, but there's something very rotten going on right now. I mean, look at that old gentleman in London, Thomas O'Halloran. He was out collecting for Ukraine charities, killed, 87 years old, in his wheelchair. And the man thought to be responsible. CCTV's been released of him. I hope he gets a whole life tariff. I hope he's never released. Apparently, some boys were seen around him. I hope that they were trying to help him and it wasn't something else. Because, not all young people are bad. Certainly not. But, I mean, what do you say about something like this? Um, Detective, I'm just going to read out a little segment from another one of the reports on this case. Detective Chief Superintendent Mark Kamen said that the force had a number of names provided to us, but that this was a complex investigation, and before we decide if that information is accurate, he warned the killer, "We will not rest until we find you, and we will find you." Well, good. I'm pleased they're taking a hard line, but they are going to have a challenge because these cards who think that they're being honourable by not informing on this scam. Um, they'd rather protect themselves than that this little girl's family get justice. I mean, one can hope that the Liverpool criminal fraternity would prove themselves to have an ounce of humanity and turn on this killer. But if it's a gangland feud, then he didn't intend to kill a little girl. So, if we inform him, that's dishonourable. It's a flipping sickness. I will swear there. I don't want to be censored by YouTube, but this is a virus, and it's really impacting our cities. Um, Liverpool has had a long-standing problem, so you're going to. Well, I was going to say you'll get variation from city to city, but actually, most big cities have similar problems. It's not unique to Liverpool. Even in smaller cities, like here in Sunderland, the whole notion of grassing is deemed to be taboo. You know, I say grassers, that is, people going to the police, shouldn't be stigmatized. I think if they're going to the police, um, because they know it's the right thing to do, they are good citizens. And if they're criminals, maybe that shows that they have a possibility of reform. In fact, a known criminal that goes to the police and grasses, I think he or she should be given some level of protection. So there has to be an incentive there, of course. But I do think a big part of this is smashing gang culture, by which I mean not just making arrests and for crimes, but actually really forcefully stigmatizing what it means to be a criminal. I mean, in Japan, the yakuza is stigmatized. The yakuza are ruthless, right? They're ruthless criminals, but they are stigmatized in Japanese society. Japan is one of the safest countries in the world, so maybe there is something in that. I'm not saying, we can exactly replicate that, but maybe there's something in that. It seems to me, not just in Britain, in the States as well, and in much of the Western world, criminals are glorified. That's the reality. Criminals are glorified when they should be stigmatized. They should be stigmatized. And I have to say, we have to be honest about this. Even in this country, maybe not as bad as the Americans in terms of turning criminals into Robin Hood type figures. But look at the Cray twins. I mean, they're treated like legends. And what are they really? What were they? They were glorified criminals. They weren't heroes. Reggie and Ronnie Cray were criminals. They were criminals. They're not Robin Hoods of the East End. They were criminals. So I wouldn't go so far as to say let's ban mob films. I mean, I made a video about this recently. I would say though that mob films vary in terms of what the message is. Ones I tend to respect more, find something in, is those that actually show the futility of that lifestyle. An example of this is A Bronx Tale. Now, A Bronx Tale, and I don't want to go off topic here, but A Bronx Tale showed the young guy in that 17. He had on one hand his father, Robert De Niro, who was just an ordinary man, a bus driver, and on the other hand, his father figure, Charles Palminteri, who was a mobster, top mobster. But it didn't show the glamour of gang lifestyle, quite the opposite. And that's a clever film. I think it deserved a lot more attention. Something like Goodfellas, Goodfellas been really hyped up. Um, I feel sometimes those sort of films, i.e., mob films that overtly glamorize the lifestyle, that's what they're doing. I mean, the last scene of Goodfellas I didn't like because it was very much he was under witness protection, and it was like, oh, it's boring now. Well, what's the message to take away from that? Um, but I'm not saying let's censor mob films. I'm just saying that we have to look at what young men are seeing as appealing in this lifestyle. As predominantly young men, sometimes young women as well. There are girl gangs out there, but it's mostly young men. I remember I was getting a haircut a few years ago. My friend's been doing it throughout the pandemic. But, young guy who was cutting my hair, must have been about 18. Um, he kind of took me off guard and he was talking about some mobster that he looked up to. I'm thinking, I kind of laughed like, did he really just say that? It's a sickness. So this is why people need to support the police. Of course, the police can be criticised, and when they cross a line, absolutely they should be held to account. When you have police committing crime, they should be chucked out like rotten apples and arrested. It's not going to be reassuring if we have criminals who are wearing a uniform. I firmly believe that police officers who commit crime should be arrested, not put on desk duty. So cleaning up police forces is a huge part of it. I mean, the Met, for example, I don't want to go off subject here, but when you have officers joking about rape victims, I mean, the rotten eggs, they should be absolutely chucked out without a pension. Um, so police forces need to really get rid of the rotten apples. Like, seriously. Um, anyway, there's not much more to say. I just hope this little girl, Olivia Pratt Corbell, I hope she gets justice. I hope her killer is put away for many years. And I think anyone protecting him should also be put away. There needs to be a message sent out that this culture, it's toxic. But I think the whole grassing thing is something that isn't tackled enough. It's kind of treated like a side product. Oh, well, that's the way they think. Maybe that's something that needs to be targeted a lot more. This actual culture of don't grass. I think there should be much harsher penalties for threatening witnesses, even if those witnesses happen to be other criminals. But of course, they won't go to the police, will they? But certainly civilian witnesses, anyone, let's say for the sake of argument, a little girl or any other civilian is killed in gang crossfire and a local shopkeeper sees it. And then some gang leader goes to that shopkeeper and says, you go to the police and you get a bullet. Um, I think if they can have the confidence to go to the police, then the threat alone should warrant jail, mandatory jail, not a warning, jail. Criminals have to feel absolute, they need to feel an onslaught of pressure of the consequences that they will face. Certainly, I think it requires much harsher sentencing. The Sentencing Council is a joke. It's a useless organisation that I would dearly like to see replaced. Um, the Parole Board's a joke, another useless organisation. The Ministry of Justice in general, um, I don't think they're really on the side of the British public. I think they're in a vortex of bureaucracy. I don't think they understand public anger. I think, to be fair, a lot of regular police officers must be immensely frustrated. I think they know that they arrest these criminals and then they go before a judge and they're given a tap on the wrist. And I am not suggesting any of this is simple, but my God, if we have a situation where grassing is deemed to be more serious than helping to bring justice for the murder of a little girl, there's something purely evil about that. In closing this video, my thoughts are entirely with her family. I just hope she gets justice.